In the ever-evolving world of virtual reality, one name that has progressively emerged is Pico. Since the company's inception in 2015, Pico has charted a path marked by innovation, adaptability, and at times controversy over its design choices. Now, as part of the ByteDance family under the same umbrella as TikTok, Pico stands at a crossroads, balancing its pioneering spirit against the uncertainties of a rapidly changing tech landscape. Founded in 2015 by Henry Zhu Hanweng, former vice president of GoerTek, Pico started as a relatively obscure entity in the VR world. In these early years, Pico was navigating a landscape dominated by giants like Oculus and HTC. VR was having a renewed interest for the first time in nearly 2 decades, and the first major consumer headsets of the modern era, the Rift CV1 and HTC Vive, were still in development. Pico took a different approach to other VR companies from the get-go, focusing on developing standalone VR headsets that balanced quality with affordability. Despite that these headsets may be most popular within the PC VR market these days, with headsets such as the Neo 3 Link and the Pico 4, the company's approach to VR was standalone hardware from the very beginning. This forward thinking allowed them to reach some surprising milestones that often go unappreciated, such as releasing a standalone 6 Degrees of Freedom headset with tracked controllers almost 2 years before the Oculus Quest 1. As Pico continued to grow, it maintained a focus on refining its technology and expanding its market presence. The company wasn't just selling VR headsets, it was cultivating an ecosystem. This ecosystem included not only hardware but also software and content, which became increasingly crucial as the VR industry began to mature. Initially, Pico would partner with HTC, having content coming to their headsets through Vive Wave. However, as time progressed, Pico began to become more independent and grew to where they are today, having the second largest standalone VR app store in the market. Seeing as Pico has traditionally been a hardware-first company, let's start there and look at the surprisingly robust lineup of headsets that they've released over the years. In 2017, Pico introduced the curiously named Pico Goblin. The Goblin was designed to offer a complete VR media viewing experience without the need for external hardware, setting it apart from many of its contemporaries. It featured a Qualcomm Snapdragon 820 processor, providing robust performance for a standalone device of its time. The headset was equipped with a single LCD display, delivering a resolution of 2560 by 1440 pixels, which was impressive for its time. With a refresh rate of 70Hz, it offered a smooth visual experience for most applications, but not up to the standard that many would expect today. The Pico Goblin also came with a 3 Degrees of Freedom controller, enhancing user interaction within the VR environment. Its affordability and user-friendly design made an appealing choice for those new to VR, as well as for educational and enterprise applications where ease of setup and use were paramount. The launch of the Pico Goblin marked Pico's commitment to making VR more accessible and convenient for a wider audience. It's worth noting that this headset was announced almost half a year before the Oculus Go and released 6 months earlier than that headset, although it was preceded by the comparable Gear VR for Samsung phones by about 5 months. The Pico G2, released in 2018, marked an upgrade in Pico's standalone VR headset lineup. The Goblin name was shortened to a G, which was probably the right choice, as the idea of strapping a goblin to your face may not have appealed to as many folks as Pico originally hoped. It featured a more powerful Qualcomm Snapdragon 835 processor, the same as the Quest 1, and a 5.5-inch fast switch LCD display with a resolution of 2880 by 1600 pixels. The refresh rate was also raised to 90Hz, with 4GB of RAM and 32GB of internal storage, expandable via microSD. Overall, this headset was a notable improvement. The following year saw Pico iterate on the G2 rather than releasing a new generation. Most of the specs remained the same, but the headline feature was a panel with a total resolution of 3840 by 2160, which is still beyond many headsets releasing to this day. This made the G2 4K a prized headset in 2019 for media viewing, which I could still see being an enjoyable experience even now. Due to this high resolution, the refresh rate took a knockdown to 75Hz. Pico are still releasing 3 Degree Freedom of headsets to this very day, with their latest offering being the Pico G3 released in 2023, which is, for all intents and purposes, a Neo 3 but just 3 Degrees of Freedom. Moving on from Pico's 3 Degree of Freedom headsets, we're going to look at the 6 Degrees of Freedom headsets, which are arguably the more interesting ones. We're going to actually have to turn the page back to 2017, where we find the Pico Neo CV, a milestone in Pico's history and a pioneering venture in 6 Degrees of Freedom standalone VR technology. Built on the Qualcomm Snapdragon 820 platform, this headset was a marvel of its time, featuring dual AMOLED panels with a resolution of 1920 by 1080 per eye at a 90Hz refresh rate. Though named CV, implying consumer version like the Rift CV1, the Neo CV found its niche primarily in the enterprise sector, catering to customized applications. The Neo CV was also notable for its ultrasonic tracked controllers, a technology that was innovative yet eventually phased out in favor of more reliable systems. The design choices of the Neo series at times mirrored those of competitors, but Pico's early willingness to experiment with different technologies did shine through at this time. In 2017, the Neo CV stood out as an underappreciated achievement, especially for a startup. Pico's journey into VR was marked by some naming conventions that hinted at a tendency to follow industry trends, like the Goblin seemingly echoing Oculus's Go name and Neo CV paralleling the Rift CV1. There was even a Neo DK, reminiscent of Oculus's Rift DK1 and DK2. These early models, including the one that I personally own and plan to showcase in an upcoming video, were full of surprises. The Neo DK, for example, featured a gamepad controller tethered to the headset that housed the battery and compute unit, reducing the headset's weight. This period in VR hardware was a time of exploration and experimentation, with many ideas being tested, some of which are re-emerging in more mature forms today. The Pico Neo CV made an impact in terms of the possibilities that a standalone headset could convey, but consumer adoption of the headset remained limited. The next headset from Pico would be the first to start to really change this, that being the Pico Neo 2 and the Pico Neo 2i. In 2020, Pico further elevated its VR headset lineup with the launch of these headsets, both featuring significant advancements in technology and performance, both now powered by the Qualcomm Snapdragon 845 processor, placing it in between the performance of a Quest 1 and Quest 2, but with a higher resolution than even that of the Quest 2. The Neo 2 series boasted a 4K resolution display, 3840 by 2160 pixels, providing users with sharp, clear visuals. A standout feature of the Neo 2i variant was its integrated eye tracking technology, enabling new interaction possibilities and analytics in VR, a feature we wouldn't see in other standalone headsets for some time yet. These headsets also included 6GB of RAM and 128GB of internal storage, catering to more demanding VR applications. The Neo 2 series, with its enhanced performance and features, was particularly appealing in the enterprise sector, used for training, simulation, and advanced VR applications. Both models came with 6 degrees of freedom controllers, but interestingly, this time around gone was the ultrasonic tracked controllers, and in its place was an electromagnetic tracking system. This tracking system seemed to be an improvement over the poorly received ultrasonic tracking, but was still regarded by reviewers as overall inferior to Quest 1's optical tracking system. The tracking would receive updates and be improved, although it wasn't the future for Pico going forward. I think it's worth commending Pico here for trying different tracking systems, even if they ultimately would abandon them. These tracking alternatives didn't require cameras to track them and theoretically could allow a much larger tracking volume without occlusion issues. The Neo 2 was also the beginning of Pico moving the battery out of the front unit of the headset and onto the back strap. This is a positive for balancing the headset and providing better comfort at the trade-off of a higher manufacturing cost and more potential points of failure, although my research never showed any major issues with longevity. For me personally, the Neo 2 was the first time I took notice of Pico and started to actually see some people buying and importing them. Before this, there were some folks in the West on VR forums etc. that enjoyed the Goblin series for their media viewing experiences, as a Goblin on your face is widely known to be an enjoyable experience. However, the Neo line didn't seem to make much waves at all. The original Neo line didn't seem to make many waves at all, but I do remember seeing the Neo 2 pop up from time to time, even on local marketplace websites here in Ireland, which shows that there was an interest growing significantly at this point. The next line of headsets from Pico would be the first to really catch on, that line being the Pico Neo 3. The Neo 3 line had 4 variants: the Neo 3, the Neo 3 Pro, the Neo 3 Pro I, and the Neo 3 Link. This series marked a significant expansion in Pico's VR headset lineup across 2021 and 2022. Each model catered to different segments of the market, showcasing Pico's growing ambitions and strategic market positioning. The Neo 3 was initially launched in China on May 2021, aimed primarily at the consumer market. It features Qualcomm's Snapdragon XR2 platform, a substantial upgrade over its predecessors, offering enhanced performance and now utilizes the more typical optical IR LED based tracking system similar to other headsets such as the Quest 2. The Neo 3 Pro and Neo 3 Pro I, also released in China, targeted enterprise and business markets, with the Pro Eye model including advanced eye tracking technology, as the name would imply. The Neo 3 line is notably very close to the Quest 2 in design and specs, utilising the same panels, similar Fresnel lenses, 90Hz and 120Hz option, a remarkably similar looking housing with the same 4 camera layout. It even sported the same 3-step IPD adjustment. Whether this was a result of being based on a reference design or whether it was a straight copy of the Quest 2, I couldn't confirm. Two distinct differences about the line were the now signature rear mounted battery of the head strap and the two-tone colour scheme carried over from the Neo 2. The most notable entry into the series was the Neo 3 Link, which launched in 2022. Pico aimed to introduce this headset into the Western markets, particularly Europe. The Neo 3 Link was unique in its ability to connect to a PC for a high-end PC VR experience, making it highly appealing to VR enthusiasts who desired flexibility between standalone and PC-tethered VR experiences. This feature positioned the Neo 3 Link as a direct competitor to more established headsets in the Western markets. Pico's strategy for the Western expansion included a beta program for the Neo 3 Link, allowing early adopters to experience the headset and provide feedback. In a bold move, Pico also included an offer for these beta participants to purchase the upcoming Pico 4, teasing a release window of about a year. This strategy not only generated interest in the Neo 3 Link, but also built anticipation for the future Pico 4. Despite the appeal of the Neo 3 Link and its potential in the North American market, Pico did not release it there. This decision sparked discussions about whether political tensions between China and the US might have influenced Pico's market strategy. The tech industry, particularly sectors like VR, is often impacted by international relations and trade policies. It's plausible that such factors played a role in Pico's decision to limit the distribution of the Neo 3 Link, focusing instead on markets where entry barriers were lower and market penetration could be more straightforward. The Neo 3 Link came at a crucial time for Pico. With the success of the Quest 2 and the metaverse hype in motion, it was an ideal time for them to expand, which was facilitated by the recent acquisition. It would likely not have been achievable on the same scale without the backing of ByteDance, but at the same time, its new parent company may also have closed doors to certain markets that may have been approachable in a slower long-term expansion. This is, of course, already in the past and we'll never know the alternate path of an independent Pico, but it's interesting to consider nonetheless. In many ways, the Neo 2i and Neo 3 Link captured the pinnacle of Pico's efforts to date and their own creative engineering and direction. Before moving on to their most recent headset, I would like to make a quick note about reference designs within the industry, particularly those from GoerTek, who, as we mentioned before, once had the founder of Pico in their executive ranks. GoerTek, a prominent electronics manufacturing company, plays a significant role in the VR industry, particularly in its relationship with VR headset manufacturers such as Pico. As a key supplier and partner, GoerTek provides essential components and manufacturing services for VR headsets. They even produce the Quest headsets, for example. The use of GoerTek's reference designs by various headset manufacturers has led to similarities in the appearance and features of many VR headsets, sometimes giving the impression of copycat designs. These reference designs, which offer a blueprint for hardware layout and component integration, enable manufacturers to efficiently produce VR headsets while ensuring high quality standards. However, this practice can lead to a lack of distinctiveness in physical design across different brands. I can't say for certain if the design similarities we see with the Neo 3 Link, for example, are 100% for this reason, but I do think it's worth bearing in mind before claiming a company to just be blindly copying one another. That's just my personal opinion. In many ways, it's clear that companies do copy each other, but in some ways they are working from the same source. And like we have seen earlier, Pico have beaten Oculus to market with certain concepts, so I think saying they are simply copycats is a bit dismissive. Another influence to consider is Qualcomm, who make the system on chips that runs almost all standalone headsets. If you're not familiar with a system on a chip, it's essentially the CPU and GPU that drive the headset. Qualcomm's influence in the VR space extends beyond just hardware to the software itself through offerings like their XR Spaces. Qualcomm provides reference software and tracking technology used in many VR headsets. This software is crucial for enabling advanced features like 6 degrees of freedom tracking, ensuring a consistent and high-quality user experience. The widespread adoption of Qualcomm's technologies further contributes to a standardization in the functionality and performance of various VR headsets, which, while beneficial for compatibility and user experience, can also contribute to the perception of mimicry within the VR headset market. However, we can see after the acquisition of Pico by ByteDance that they begin to take a more distinctive approach to their hardware design, which is likely something that was enabled by the significant capital backing that they now enjoyed. This brings us to Pico's latest headset and the first entirely released under the ByteDance umbrella headset, the Pico 4. In 2022, Pico took a significant step in its global expansion with the release of the Pico 4 line, which included the Pico 4, Pico 4 Pro, and Pico 4 Pro Enterprise. This launch was particularly notable for Pico's strategic push into Western markets, a move that signaled its ambition to compete more directly with established players in the VR space, notably Meta. The Pico 4 was designed with a keen focus on capturing market share. It featured a sleek and lightweight design, making it one of the more comfortable headsets in the standalone category. The headset was powered by the Qualcomm Snapdragon XR2, aligning it with the standard at the time for high-performance standalone VR experiences. It boasted a high-resolution display with a combined resolution of 4320 by 2160 pixels and a refresh rate of 90 Hz. The Pico 4 also came with newly designed controllers that offered tracking relatively on par with the Quest 2, and a tracking ring design that facilitated more fluid use of the controllers in motion. One notable change from the Neo 3 Link was the removal of the DisplayPort connection, a feature that had allowed the previous model to connect to PCs for a higher-end VR experience. This shift indicated Pico's focus on strengthening its standalone VR ecosystem, emphasizing the development of its standalone store and content library. By concentrating on these capabilities, Pico aimed to appeal to a broader consumer base, especially those seeking a high-quality VR experience without the need for additional hardware. Although this was widely seen as a step back, particularly among the community that had adopted the Neo 3 Link, who saw this as the primary selling point of the headset. The release of the Pico 4 in Western markets was a strategic move to capture a share of the rapidly growing VR market outside of Asia. Pico positioned the Pico 4 as a direct competitor to popular headsets like the Quest 2, offering generally superior experiences with many notable features such as pancake lenses, a well-balanced small form factor, high-resolution panels with a screen per eye, motorized stepless IPD adjustment, a fan that helped cool your face inside the headset, and of course the high-resolution color pass-through, albeit not depth correct. Even without the direct PC VR link, this was a compelling package at a price that rivaled the Quest 2. PC VR wireless streaming was an option out of the box, with Virtual Desktop also coming as a solution to the platform, making for what many considered to be the best wireless PC VR solution available at the time. Pico made it clear that they had a strong focus on building out their standalone store. The success of a VR headset in the consumer market is heavily influenced by the availability and quality of content. By developing a robust content library and fostering partnerships with developers, Pico aimed to make its platform more attractive to users in the West. And to this extent, they were successful. A great deal of the Quest Store library is available on the Pico Store, although the Quest does maintain notable exclusives such as Beat Saber. Pico announced a plan for exclusives, with Just Dance from Ubisoft being the flagship, but as we'll soon see, that was abandoned. For a brief period, it seemed as though the Pico 4 would be the first Pico headset to finally enter the North American market, challenging Meta in their home territory. On March 20 of 2023, Pico teased an announcement stating a new journey begins, save the date, 22 March 2023, with the Pico 4 tagged in the tweet. However, the date came and went without any journey apparently starting. It was reported by The Verge that this was indeed meant to be a US launch for the Pico 4, but due to a congressional hearing around the same time regarding a potential ban of TikTok in the US entirely, ByteDance apparently backed off to avoid adding fuel to the fire. At the time of this video, it has been the better part of a year and no notable change has happened, leaving it quite certain that we won't be seeing the Pico 4 coming to the US. This brings us to where Pico stands today as a VR headset manufacturer under the ByteDance umbrella. To cover this next part properly, we'll need to take note of the acquisition itself, so let's briefly dive into that. Likely the most pivotal moment in Pico's history to date came with its acquisition by ByteDance, the tech conglomerate best known for its social media platform TikTok. This acquisition, announced in 2021, marked a significant turning point for Pico. At this stage, Pico was the third largest VR headset maker globally, with shipments growing 44.7% year on year. This marked an interesting direction for ByteDance, more directly competing with Meta than ever, following the Oculus owner's same trajectory of social media beginning into VR hardware. ByteDance, with its vast resources and global reach, seemed poised to provide Pico with the fuel it needed to accelerate its growth and expand its footprint in the VR industry. This move was viewed by industry analysts as a strategic play by ByteDance to establish a foothold in the burgeoning VR market and diversify beyond its core social media business. Post-acquisition, Pico's growth trajectory quickly picked up in the consumer space. With ByteDance's backing, Pico rapidly expanded its research and development efforts. This period also saw Pico stepping up its marketing and sales efforts, reaching out to new markets and demographics. The company, once viewed as a relatively niche player in the VR space, was now being seen as the only chance of a true competitor to the Meta Quest line of headsets. However, this rapid expansion was not without its challenges. As Pico grew, it faced the daunting task of maintaining its unique identity and core values in the face of increased expectations and market pressure. The VR community, initially skeptical of Pico's potential under ByteDance, watched closely as the company navigated these waters. Pico's older headsets were arguably more original in their approach and design. However, by the time of the Neo 3 Link, we were seeing a convergence on Meta's approach to VR. Interestingly, thanks to the Neo 3 Link's namesake feature of a DisplayPort connection, this would see Pico approach PC VR more for the first time during a period when other headset manufacturers were pulling away. This is perhaps a remnant of the original DNA of Pico before the acquisition, which would see its first complete project in the Pico 4, dropping the DisplayPort connection and doubling down on the standalone store. Late 2023 brought about significant developments that further shaped the narrative around Pico's future. Despite its absence in North America, Pico, under the ownership of ByteDance, had been making strides in the VR industry. However, rumours began to circulate about potential changes in the company. In late 2023, reports emerged suggesting ByteDance was considering scaling down its operations at Pico Interactive, its China-based VR headset division. These rumours were initially dismissed by the company, but a subsequent report by Reuters, citing sources familiar with an internal meeting, indicated significant restructuring within Pico. According to the report, the company planned to lay off staff primarily involved in sales, videos, and platform operations, potentially affecting hundreds of employees. The restructuring plans involved retaining the VR hardware team at Pico while integrating much of its software team back into ByteDance's broader product development unit. This move appeared to be a strategic shift, emphasizing a focus on hardware and core technologies over expansive software operations. Henry Zhu Hongwei, in the reported internal meeting, commented on the state of the VR industry, acknowledging that it was still in its infancy. He noted that the company's initial projections for industry and market growth were overly optimistic, with actual progress not matching their expectations. The exact number of employees facing layoffs has not been disclosed, but the impact was expected to be global, signifying a major scale back in Pico's operations. This development was in line with Pico's confirmation to Reuters about the business restructuring, though the company refrained from commenting on the specifics of the job cuts. As we look at Pico's journey today, we see a company that has grown from a bold startup to a key player under the vast umbrella of ByteDance. Pico's initial forays into VR were marked by innovative hardware designs, which often are overlooked based on claims of mimicry based on their more well-known modern headsets. Now, facing rumours of restructuring and navigating the complexities of a competitive market, Pico's path forward is as intriguing as its past. Their story is not just about technology and market strategies, it's about the spirit of innovation in the face of uncertainty. As the VR landscape continues to evolve, Pico's journey is a narrative that reminds us of the constant ebb and flow in the world of technology. What the future holds for Pico remains to be seen, but one thing is certain, their story is far from over. I hope you enjoyed this video. It's the first of its kind on this channel, and I'm hoping to do more, but these types of documentary style videos do take a lot of time and effort, and I'm still relatively new to it all, so I hope the quality of the visuals and pacing etc. wasn't too distracting. If you enjoyed this video, then please do share it, as I think Pico's story is an interesting one worth knowing. Hopefully I will return to a part 2 of this at some stage down the road. Take care and hope you have a great day.